Oh, there it goes.
There it goes.
All right. Today is the June 18th LA Cafe event, and we're just getting started here with John Giarelli, who has written a book. It's called The Gay Boomer Story, a Gay Boomer Story, and it's a memoir of his life, and he mentions Antioch several times in the book itself. So, John, welcome. You want to just say a brief thing about two or three things about yourself
and the book?
Sure.
Well, we'll get into the book for sure.
Okay. Well, actually, the back of the book has a brief description, but at first, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Connecticut and went to through a Catholic educational process as a youngster, and was on track for being a pretty conservative young Catholic boy going to Jesuit prep school, which is very enlightening. The Jesuits are wonderful teachers, and I was kept on that track and started college at Boston College, a Jesuit university, and slowly started realizing that I was a bit different than the what I like to say and what now may be considered somewhat prejudiced or sexist. I didn't fit in amongst the jock and cheerleader types at a large Catholic sports themed university, and I started searching for a better fit of a college that fit me better, and I started on the East Coast and slowly moved westward until I found the place that the campus that I walked onto and felt like I had found my true home. And so that started in the mid 76. I found Antioch in 76. I didn't start until all of 77. I was there until the summer of 1980. And that turned out to be the 3.5 or 4 years of the most influential period of my life. The beginning. I like to say it was the start of my new life.
Sure.
What were you gonna say, Peter?
Well, I was going to ask you, what did you major in while you were at Antioch?
So I started out in English. That was my major at BC, and I was in some of the honors English courses, writing courses at Boston College, and I continued that at Antioch until I wandered into the music building and took a course with a man named John Ronsheim.
Sure.
And he was so inspiring and so wonderful, and I started to find my singing voice and my musical voice, that I decided to switch majors to music. And I remember sitting on the steps. This is in the book, actually. I was sitting on the steps of the music building one day, and Professor Ronsheim walked up to me and said hi and asked me how I was doing. And I gleefully announced to him that I had switched majors to music. And I'll never forget his comment. He said, "Well, it looks like you're really beginning to blossom, John." And that has kind of stayed with me throughout my life. It was the first time someone said that to me, and someone actually approved of me taking a different path in my life. And from up until then, there was mostly an approved path by either parents or, a kind of academic track that I
Sure.
was on. And so Professor Ronsheim was a great influence on me. But then I switched to art because I started painting in the art building and staying up all night in the art studios and painting very psychedelic, somewhat LSD influenced paintings. And I switched to art and became an art major. And then eventually, when I came down off of those acid trips, I switched back to English and have stayed with English pretty much the rest of my life.
Yeah, no, well, that's I was a biology major and also but as I said before, did a lot of work with photography, and I was able to do that in my professional career. I had a couple of nice co-ops, but all in the sciences myself. What kind of, did you go on co-ops, or what were the type of co-op experiences you had?
Well, I turned a assistant poetry editor position at the Antioch Review into a co-op job, and so I got co-op credit for working for being a poetry screener for Nolan Miller, the poetry editor of the Review at the time. And I'm sure Nolan's no longer with us. I have no idea of when Nolan might have passed, but he was another amazing influence in my life. And
Well,
after, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, the Antioch Review is on a long hiatus. So, there are a lot of people saying, "Oh, when's it coming back? Is it coming back? Who owns it? Who gets to?" I think Joan might have a little feedback on that. You're muted, though. You'll have to unmute.
It is coming back. President Jane Fernandez.
I've got it. So at a recent meeting in New York to honor Bob Fogarty, who was the recent editor of the Antioch Review, it was announced by Jane Fernandez, the new president of Antioch, that the review will be resumed, that they are looking for a tenured track professor of English who would be the Antioch Review editor. So they're actually designating a position on the faculty for the Antioch Review, and that person would also teach a bit as well.
Well, that's fantastic. Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Yeah.
I actually, the year that I started working under Nolan Miller at the Review was the year when they hired Bob Fogarty. So I remember his first day coming into the Antioch Review office and starting there.
And to catch you up with something else, John, you should also know that Nolan Miller and his brother left a large amount of money to the college and the village to support co-ops working in the local area and students doing work for the village, in the village.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Yes.
I had the unique honor of one day at the end of the semester, being called into Nolan's office, and he handed me a script, a manuscript for his book, and he knew that I was driving back east to New York to stop in New York and then go to my parents' house in Connecticut. But he asked me if I would drop it off at the editor's office in New York. So I'm not sure if that book was ever published, but I had Nolan's massive manuscript in my Chevy Impala driving across country to New York.
Was that his book called Why I Am So Beat?
Yes.
That book was published. It was quite successful. It's a novel, and
Wow.
apparently it was part of the very early beatnik movement.
Amazing.
No, so you played a significant part in that. If you had left that at the Denny's or the Howard Johnsons,
Right.
never would have happened.
Well, I had to I was dropping people off. I had to drop off my classmate, Deb Berenbaum. Deb I was dropping her off at her mom's place in Brooklyn. No, Queens. I'm sorry, Queens. Let's not make that mistake. And she, yeah, but then I had to deliver the manuscript, drop Deb off, and possibly one other student before I made that additional 2-hour drive up to Connecticut. But yeah, so oh, I'm glad I was instrumental in getting him published.
For sure. Did you do all your co-ops there in Yellow Springs?
No, I did. Where else did I co-op? I I co-opted in Vermont at a daycare center in Rutland, Vermont. For some, I decided that I wanted to work with there was a daycare center co-op job, and I thought, well, I've always wanted to spend a winter in Vermont, and this is one way that I'll get to do it. That was probably my early yearnings for living in the mountains.
Sure. Mhm.
And there was an opening, and I thought, well, I've never worked with children, so I'll do that. And they put me in the room full of 2-year-olds, which was an amazing experience.
Mhm.
I never became a parent myself, although I always say that if some 40-year-old knocks on my door and says, "Hi, Dad," there's a good chance that his mother's name is probably Valerie from Antioch, but we don't know. We're not sure. So but I would gladly accept him if he or her if they were one of my children.
Mm.
As long as they're self-sufficient and self-employed. But so I worked at a co-op job in Vermont, and then the owners of the daycare center were opening a bed and breakfast inn on the coast of Maine, and they were renovating an old house in Wells Beach, Maine. So I turned that into my next co-op. I followed them to Maine and opened a bed and breakfast inn.
Mhm.
So my co-ops were not very, my co-editor at the Antioch Record, Laura Camozzi, Richard remembers Laura Camozzi. She was a very dedicated editor of the Antioch Record in like 78, 79, and I worked under her, and then I became the editor of the record. But Laura took co-op jobs like the one at the Washington Post. That was like the creme de la creme
Sure.
co-op job for journalists and English majors, and she took that one. And I didn't follow in her footsteps to do such serious co-op jobs, and I probably should have. I didn't really take good advantage of
I don't know if that's true. I think everybody comes back from every co-op a richer person for the experience, just for having to fend for yourself and be responsible for yourself. It's really probably one of the best features of the college is the and certainly the reason that I went there is for that opportunity. But so how do you go from the hills of Vermont and the coast of Maine to like the streets of San Francisco? That's such an interesting transition, and it's far beyond any of experiences I had, or probably many people on this call. What
when I graduated from Antioch, I followed Laura and a group of people to Washington, D.C., because I had no idea what to do for the rest of my life after Antioch. I mean, it's weird, but I had such a grounded, wonderful experience at Antioch, but then all of a sudden I was emancipated and not knowing really what to do with my life, and didn't seem to have a future. So I just moved to DC with a bunch of people and wound up living with another Antiochian, Rebecca Gwynn, who now runs a very established animal shelter in like the most prestigious or largest animal shelter in the Atlanta, Georgia area. But I wound up rooming with her in a house in the Adams Morgan section of DC with a couple hippies who were already living there, and I was sort of, flailing around in DC, and I wound up going into my usual gay watering hole in DuPont Circle, which was the gay neighborhood of DC at the time, and I met the love of my life. Just in short, long story short, I met the love of my life, and he was in DC. He was a political science professor already when I met him, and he was in DC to teach a short course at the Pentagon. And so I, spent a wonderful romantic week with him, and then he went back to Oklahoma, where he was teaching at the University of Oklahoma. But he had bigger plans. He was planning on moving to San Francisco to be in the middle of the peak of the gay liberation era in San Francisco. And I decided to follow him out there, and went out, and we wound up living in San Francisco and experiencing the post. It was a weird period because there was a lot of jubilation. People were moving to San Francisco from everywhere around the world to become, to live more honest, authentic lives in San Francisco. And Harvey Milk had just been assassinated a couple years earlier, so there was tension. There was revolution in the air, but it was mainly a big party on Castro Street and throughout the Bay Area, and it was the place to be. It was where it was at for the LGBTQ community, and then AIDS hit, and we were having such a crazy, wonderful life that it took a couple of years for it to sink in that AIDS was starting to introduce itself into the entire community.
Yeah, it must have been.
In fact, at first, there's a scene in the book where I say that I was part of the headline from the San Francisco Chronicle in 1981 that said mysterious virus causes the death of 7 gay men, and I remember thinking, what a shame. That's terrible that's happening to them. I never thought that it would come home and affect me, and I ended up losing my lover and my circle of friends in San Francisco, and then that was it. It changed. Everything changed after that.
Yeah, it was a devastating time. I lived, outside and close to Sacramento and Davis, and so I had many friends in the Bay Area. It was just devastating and was sad. It was a real tragedy, really. And then, the administration at that time, similar to the administration now, just didn't give a shit about it. They just did everything they could to avoid the topic. Did you happen to ever meet Heidi Wyckoff in San Francisco?
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
Heidi and I were very good friends from, Yellow Springs days. She passed
Oh,
away a couple of years ago. Um,
oh,
yeah, very, very sad. But yeah, we kept together, kept in touch for quite a bit. Yeah, she was she hosted one of the craziest parties I ever went to. It's a little bit naive then. I brought my like 2-year-old daughter, to one of those parties in San Francisco, and she still remembers that. I mean, I don't know from pictures or what, but that was, yeah, probably the best party I've been to ever.
oh.
That's good.
Yeah, it was wonderful. We were living in the Haight-Ashbury, and there was, by 1980, there were still some vestiges of the Summer of Love in the 60s. There's some hippies still hanging on in San
Mhm.
Francisco, but for the most part, the hate was changing its character
Right.
from hippie to kind of punk rock. Angry punk rockers, but it was still fun. San Francisco was a wonderful part of my life. So what the book does, it kind of follows me along through the past 6 full decades
Mhm.
of life, and what seemed to happen in each of those decades was that I was kind of landing in or searching for what I like to refer to as true home. And the book almost got that title, but I thought it was too cliche. But it kind of came down to, like, especially as a gay person, where is my true home, and do I belong here? It's not. I tried not to make it a Hallmark daytime, where do I belong
Mhm.
kind of story, but it did. It, after all, the last chapter kind of sums it up about, if have I found where I belong. It and then, it kind of gives the idea that I've been searching for place, and perhaps many other gay people were have spent the last or gay boomers have spent the last 6 or 7 decades in a search for a safe place. We at one time, Antioch and Antioch College was that safe space for someone who was coming out. And when I arrived at Antioch, the older gay crowd at the Gay Center, and that's what it was called back then. It was the LGB Center,
Mhm.
the old beat up house on campus, and some of the radical fairies were still there, and they insisted that I come out to my parents when I did eventually realize that I needed to come out. And
Mhm.
I said, oh God, no, I'm not coming out to my Italian immigrant father, who was very stern and everything, but they were insistent. There was always that encouragement to evolve and move forward
Mhm.
at Antioch, and that's what I loved about it. But so each decade kind of found me in a new place, a
Mhm.
new home, and now, so I hopped from coast to coast. And I was thinking, if we have time, would you want me to read the Yellow Springs chapter?
Yeah, how much time? I don't remember how. Yeah, we can do that for sure. Why not? I would like to say that I really like that with each decade of your life, you have sort of like a song associated or a soundtrack.
Right,
I,
right.
I really obviously I knew all those songs. But I thought it was a great literary technique or whatever you want to call it. But it really.
Starting with the scene where my cousin and I are sitting on the living room floor of our house in the early 60s, and the Ed Sullivan
Mhm.
show came on, and he announced the Beatles. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Started with the Beatles and made its way all the way through the disco era with the Village People and Patti LaBelle and Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive." Richard can tell a story about our connection to that song "I Will Survive." Right, Richard?
you're on
I
mute.
don't need to. I will either just verify or deny. That's my only purpose for being here. But I will verify that story. Yes.
Yeah, well, I was in that little email I wrote. I did think that all of us have a song track to our lives, and I think it'd be interesting to sort of poll the Antioch community and see where there's overlap.
Right.
I've done a lot of work on the Antioch Adventure, and there's a song track in there, and
Yes.
everyone, of course, in that mid to late 60s, that's part of their soundtrack. I think it'd be an interesting sort of research product or so.
I forgot. I'm hitting myself because I forgot to add that experience of sitting in the auditorium in Main Hall, in the Kelly Hall Auditorium, and watching during my introduction to Antioch, watching the Antioch experience and the Antioch Adventure, and seeing them dancing on the roof of the student union and singing to the song. Oh man,
Dancing in the Streets. I think that one.
Shout it out around the world. Are you ready for a brand new beat? Yeah, Dancing in the Streets. Yep.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I myself, I have four VHS tapes in my life left remaining, and one of them is the Antioch Adventure.
Well, about in 2020 on the virtual reunion, there was a live panel discussion with Jessica Lipnick, John Draper, Richard Bosch. They talked about the film, the atmosphere on campus, the issues that they had. It was a fantastic sort of recap of the whole movie. I am working on a little video that of the Zoom, that brings in some of that conversation and some clips and so on. But I tell you that that video editing and assembly, the original Zoom video was not useful. There was just terrible stuff. But there's a lot of great insight in that little panel discussion. It really should be archived. Just a lot of good information in there. But what time? It's 4:40. Yeah, why don't you find a section, John, from the book? I've got my copy right here. This doesn't work too good with the virtual background. There it is. So, did you self-publish? Is this a self-published book?
Yes, it's on the site that what'd you say? We all love to hate.
Oh yes,
on Amazon. Yeah, I'm gonna do a second edition on. I think on. Oh man, my memory's failing now. The
sure.
Another publishing site, Spark. That will allow small independent bookstores, distributors to pick it up.
We had another author that we interviewed that had a self-published book, but then that book was taken up by a publishing house in New York that publishes, self-published books. They sort of give it a second life. So there are organizations like that out there.
Oh, great. Okay.
I can send you a link there after this.
I contacted an independent bookstore in Riverside, out here, Riverside, California, called the Cellar Door Bookshop, and the owner got back to me and said that she would love. They have a decent LGBTQ section, and they do. I saw on their website that they do like a drag queen reading hour at the bookstore. So I thought I'd give it a shot. She got back to me and said, I'd love to carry your book, but unfortunately our distributor won't carry it, won't pick it up because it's on Amazon. So
Oh. Yeah, well, they are, yeah, like I say, the place we love to hate, you know, that's too bad, you know. But I don't know, you know, I live up on a hill in Los Angeles, and there is no really easy access to a bookstore. When I lived in Davis, you know, we had some great independent bookstores. I just walk downtown and come back with 3 or 4 books. And now I don't know, it's not rewarding to go to Amazon and buy a book. You know, it's much,
yeah.
You know, you have to sort of pick up the book, look at the cover, right? But then go through the pages and just sort of glance through. Buying something online is not satisfying.
Have you do you go to Book Soup?
You know, I have not done much around here. I mean, I have been, there's this big bookstore downtown. You know, it's like 2 stories tall. I've been there. I bought a number of books from them. They are
Is it the Last Bookstore?
That sounds right. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fantastic place. They've got new books, used books.
Yes.
And it's, yeah, it is
tunnels of books.
Yes, I know. They have that architectural statue made out of books into a circle, you know, by overlapping the books. It's always sad to me to see books used as something other than books. But then when you realize there are, you know, just billions of books out there, you know. Well, I think that my greatest regret in history is that they burned down the Alexandria Library. I keep on thinking, what was in that library, you know?
Right.
Well, let's have some reminiscence about Yellow Springs.
There is such a statue in Yellow Springs made of books. It's actually bronze, and it's in front of the public library.
I'll check. I'm going to Reunion, so I'll see anyone who goes there this year, but I'll check that out. Thank you.
I haven't been back to Yellow Springs since June of 1980.
You'll cry.
It's
you know, it's such an emotional thing to walk on campus.
I'm afraid to, because when I first walked onto that campus, I cried, knowing that I felt like I had found my home.
Yeah.
I understand they got the money to tear down the student union, so I guess that's gone.
No, that's
not
happening
gone yet, but they did get the money.
They got the grant. Yeah,
they got the grant to tear it down, and it is dangerous. So they will tear it down because it's full of asbestos and stuff. But they're going to keep the stoop, and there's going to be a funeral at Reunion. They're going to stage a funeral for the student union, which is interesting to me because I was a student before there was a student union. So it doesn't even feel old to me. But anyway, they're going to have a funeral.
Where was the student union?
We didn't have a student union. We just used the C shop for socializing and things like that.
And where was the C shop?
The C shop was in a Quonset hut that doesn't exist anymore. It was one of those half dome things.
Yes.
From World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Were you there for the construction of Red Square?
That was later.
That was later.
Yeah,
Wow.
I'm very old.
No, they're not. Well, you don't look
anyway,
it.
the student union, I was going to say, at the funeral, we've been told to wear white, which is somehow a funerary color. And we're supposed to, they're going to have a candlelit service for the student union to go to heaven.
Well, I don't think it's going to heaven, but, you know, I think I did
do it as a Viking funeral and just burn the place down.
Yeah, I did break into the union in 2019. Actually, I didn't break in; the back door was open, and it's a mess inside. But I did go upstairs and went to the dark room It's amazing how much you forget and then how much you remember. Like, yeah, I know that staircase. I know where this goes, yeah, but it's a shame that they're tearing it down, but I'm glad that they're keeping the stoop. And I guess they're going to try to make some sort of a platform or a stage or some sort of structure to keep that, because it's, I don't know when they built it, probably in the 60s, right?
It was built in about 1960.
Yeah. Yeah. There used to be a street going right by it, an open
North
road.
College Street just went all the way to Corey.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
So it was there when I started in 59.
Oh, really? Well, we'll
Yeah.
have to get some history of that.
59, did you say?
Yeah,
Okay, so I was off by 1 year. But
Mhm.
anyway, yeah, about
Well,
that.
we don't know. You could be off by 2 years,
We used to folk dance there.
No, Jesse is right. If Jesse says it was 59, it was 59. I
Well,
always
she just said that it was there in 1959. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting too
Okay.
pedantic here.
It was not there in 57.
All right. Well, I'll come back with a
not
report
gonna be-
from Reunion and get that data down here.
I would
I
love for
think
John to
my
read
signal's
about Yellow Springs. What is Yellow Springs?
All right, we got about 15 minutes left. I don't think we'll have too many questions. We've had a nice conversation going on here.
I thought John was going to read some of his.
Yes,
Illustrate.
why don't you do that, and we'll then take a couple of questions from Nancy afterwards.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Because my internet signal out.
It comes and goes, but right now it's just perfect.
Okay.
Nope. Well, now it just went, so you're gone. No, that's too bad. That's what happens when you live in the mountains,
Wesleyan, Middlebury, Bennington, Goddard, Hampshire, Marlborough, Bowdoin, and Colby, then continued west to New York State at Bard, Hamilton, and Hobart, then down to Swarthmore and Haverford in Pennsylvania, and finally into Ohio at Oberlin and Kenyon colleges. Kenyon College, Paul Newman's alma mater, where I fell in love with the storybook campus and a hippie girl named Karen. That night we made love in her dorm room. I guess you could say I was back to being straight after Harold and Provincetown. That's in a previous chapter. Or bi, which is really the on-ramp to the gay freeway, but I warned you about the mixed up 70s, so I get a technical pass. The next day, after a tearful kiss goodbye and hollow promises to return, I drove past pig farms into a funky little village about an hour southwest of Columbus called Yellow Springs. I walked onto the campus of Antioch College and instantly felt at home. I suppose the admissions department interviewer also felt something, as he let me know then and there that I was welcome at Antioch. I knew they needed more students, as enrollments were just beginning to drop at all the small liberal arts colleges across the country. But at that moment, his gesture felt sincere and authentic, a quality I would learn to recognize about both Antioch and the Yellow Springs community from that day forward. I walked out of the majestic main hall on cloud 9, like I had just been handed the keys to the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz, and floated across the campus in an out-of-body state of inner peace and joy, until I made it back to the room I was assigned to in West Hall, where the student whose quarters he was sharing with prospective students like myself had hundreds of science fiction novels on his shelves and walked barefoot around the campus, dressed in a long black cape and carrying a tall wooden staff. I knew right then and there that I had found the college and the town that fit me. The college and the town were almost one and the same, mostly students, artists, and hippies, though some of the local blue-collar townies were wickedly attractive. Those Southern Ohio, Northern Kentucky bad boys trying to score with the Antioch women and hopefully with me. Professor Ronsheim saw me sitting on the steps of the music building one day in 1978 and stopped to ask how I was doing. I enthusiastically answered that I had just switched majors from English to music. His perfectly empowering response was, "Well, it looks like you're really beginning to blossom, John." If I could talk to him today, which I recently learned I cannot, I would tell him that his comment not only stayed with me throughout my life, but became a metaphor for it. The day I set foot in Yellow Springs, Ohio, was the first day of my own life, the day I finally began to blossom in my true home.
Wow.
Do we have more time?
Sure.
I met a girl with jet black hair, wild and athletic, both in and out of the sack, and Jewish. She had recently broken up with the campus god, a blonde Adonis from California, who unexpectedly announced that he was gay. 40 years later, I would run into him living in the same tiny mountain town that I had moved to in California. She liked my poetry and sensitive nature, and we made love in my dorm room every night. The next semester, we got a couples room together. They had those at Antioch, along with co-ed showers and no grades. Gotta love those liberal arts colleges, man. We began a life together, or so we thought. We would romantically hike in Glen Helen, a massive nature preserve owned by the college, situated just over the railroad tracks from the campus. I would drop acid in the deep, dark pine forest there. She was a bit more restrained, not a drug user, but an awakening feminist. In a sense, we were both blossoming at the same time, just in different directions. I had a work study job as a manuscript reader for Nolan Miller, the poetry editor at the esteemed literary journal, the Antioch Review, where writers and poets like Ralph Ellison, Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, and Mark Strand were published early in their careers. I'd sit for hours in the coffee shop in downtown Yellow Springs, reading and writing poetry. My girlfriend started taking EST, the self-improvement psyche healing course created by Werner Erhard, the new age guru of the 70s and 80s. She'd come back to our cozy little dorm room after a seminar and cry through her existential pain. I would stay up all night in the art studios, as I had by then changed my major once again, painting through my own painful confusion on massive canvases while tripping on acid. In the early morning, I'd quietly return to our love nest with my latest abstract masterpiece in hand, the most memorable depicting that mysterious pine forest in the Glen, and hang it on the wall above our bed, just as she was waking. We would screw before class. One time she said I wasn't doing a good job orally down there. I tried to improve my technique, but I was blossoming, apparently back in the other direction again. You can sometimes lie to kick it, but you sure can't fool Mother Nature. My best friend at Antioch was Eric, a social butterfly on campus and an actor and comedian. He knew me well. We were kindred spirits, connected at the hip, even when living at opposite ends of the country years later. We started attending events at the college's gay center, located in a beat old house on campus. Everyone went there. It was Antioch, for crying out loud. Around this time, I started meeting lots of great folks, not all gay, but all beautiful, loving people, like Emily, who I drove to her first abortion and love to this day, even though I'm insanely jealous that she's now living on Lake Tahoe. There was Laura, my editor at the Antioch Record school newspaper, Rebecca, a cool drinking and traveling buddy and housemate right after college, Scott and Miriam, Richard, Deb, Karen, Lisa, Angel, Tana, Larry, and Emily, Duffy, John, Dawn, David, Charles, Julie, Yvette, and Fish. Yes, Fish, a Black gay drag queen from Beckley, West Virginia. We never called him by his real name, but the following semester he returned from break with a very real man on his arm, a straight up thug, butch as nails, gangsta from Appalachia, who just happened to be gay. And the next thing we knew, their unofficial wedding ceremony was celebrated in the gay house, where Fish descended the rickety staircase in a full-on floor-length veil and train white wedding gown. Now, where the hell was he hiding that? Soon after my introduction to the LGB community at Antioch, that's all it was called back then, I started hearing rumblings about a Tim who had just returned to campus from his co-op job. Antioch had them too for real life experience credit as a picker on an Oregon pea farm. Life as I knew it ended at that very moment, and a new one began as I walked across Red Square one evening towards the cafeteria in the student union for dinner. There he was, standing on the steps. I knew this had to be Tim, 6 feet tall, lean, muscular, incredibly sexy, farm boy man. Okay, so I might just be embellishing the farm and man parts, but he sure looked like he had just jumped off a tractor to grab some victuals at the local saloon. After all, Tim was from the Midwest, Rockford, Illinois, to be precise, and I was from the New York City area, where we looked a little more Mediterranean, hardly strapping 6 foot tall, blue-eyed Midwest all-American farm boy. He was my exact opposite and just my type. I was really blossoming now. In fact, I was all, I'm coming out, like Diana Ross in Central Park. After getting to know him, I fell full throttle, triple axle, Donna Summer, love to love you, baby, in love with Tim. Unfortunately, he already had an other with whom he was cohabitating. I knew this because I would take my evening stroll and stop to stretch on the grassy knoll just outside their dormitory ground floor window. I believe that was President's Hall. Every night I would do that. And when that relationship ended, I went all, it's my turn, Diana Ross, only to be the last girl at the dance to learn that he was already taken, nay, stolen, by none other than Richard, who's on this Zoom call, another handsome worked out stud with chest hair and a Camaro. That asshole who looked like the hot cowboy in The Village People is now a lifelong friend. I cried myself to sleep, came out to and broke up with my Est goddess girlfriend all at once, who had to process cry through even more pain that I was now inflicting on her already fragile psychic stability, thanks to both her first closet case boyfriend and Werner Erhard. And I got myself a room in Birch Hall, the gay and lesbian dorm, directly below Richard and Tim. Not intentionally, one night after they had loud enough sex for me to hear, Richard lowered a radio down to my window on a string when Gloria Gaynor's hit song, I Will Survive, came on, which was like every hour that year. He's never been forgiven for that. And I never did have a real relationship with Tim, but he made me feel real love for the first time. I'm sure he knew that I would always love him, even on the day when he took his own life after receiving an HIV positive diagnosis in the early 1990s, choosing to avoid the onslaught of opportunistic infections, which inevitably led to death from AIDS at that time. Thank you, Emily, for being there with him at the end. He's our beautiful Midwest farm boy in angel in heaven now. Life became lonely for me at Antioch after leaving my girlfriend and straight identity behind and experiencing the heartbreak of unrequited love for the first man to whom I opened this beating heart. Soon after graduating from Antioch, I met my one true love, my soulmate. We caught the moment in time at the very peak of the gay liberation era in San Francisco at the dawn of the 1980s. In fact, the hit disco song at the turn of that decade, just as I had graduated from Antioch and was heading for new horizons, was Born to Be Alive, a destiny so many others never got to fulfill. Once again, amazingly, over 40 years later, I'm still standing like Elton John. I guess I'm destined to fulfill the instruction of the educator and first president of Antioch College, Horace Mann. Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity. It's such a goddamn bittersweet burden.
Thank you very much.
That's just lovely.
Mhm. Yeah, that's worth buying the book for, just that section. Mhm.
Seems like we
Thanks.
lost Tanya.
Yeah, Tanya had to. She warned us. She had another event. She's retired, but she's busier than anybody I know. Well, maybe you, Joan. I mean, you certainly are keeping things up.
No, well, my friends don't believe me, but living in the mountains can be a little tiring at times. There's a lot to do up here, and I have 3 dogs that I have to cook for and feed every night.
Yeah.
You
Well,
cook for your
winter is
dog?
coming whenever you live in the mountains, right? Mhm.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I have to start gathering firewood
Sure.
in a couple months. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which mountains? I got on late, so I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm John.
Hi, John.
I'm up in the Big Bear area in the mountains of Southern California between LA and Joshua Tree.
Sure. Good. Beautiful.
Where are you?
I'm in Pasadena.
Oh, okay.
In the foothill, I'm on the Altadena, Pasadena border. I'm in the foothills of the San Gabriels, but I'm not up in the mountains.
Perfect. Yeah, I was
Up a hill.
in West Hollywood for almost 20 years, and I started exploring all the local mountain towns and finally settled on a little town called Green Valley Lake
Mhm.
in between
Nice.
Lake Arrowhead and Big Bear.
Awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, I went for my first trip up to Big Bear this last early fall, and I know you speak of it in your book in not too glowing terms. And I have to say, I probably wouldn't go back up there because it does look like it's all monster trucks and big boats and stuff. But the area up there is just beautiful. I mean, it's. Maybe I'll stop by Green Valley sometime and check it out.
Please do. Please do. It's the antithesis of Big Bear. I was stuck in traffic on Big Bear Boulevard thinking, well, this isn't exactly the mountain town fantasy that I had in my head of, kind of a off the grid, remote, undiscovered place. And so I kept passing the rickety old sign along the way to Big Bear that said Green Valley Lake, 4 miles up this little road, and finally went up there and found it, and I've made some lifelong friendships. It's as the old veterinarian in Lake Arrowhead at the Lake Arrowhead Veterinary Hospital said to me when I asked him if he had heard of Green Valley Lake. He said, "Oh yes, but I haven't been there in many years. Lots of eccentrics there."
Well, I'm glad
I said, don't you mean weirdos, doctor?
I could attest. Twice I've been up to Green Valley Lake to visit John, and never had I had snow 6 inches on Memorial Day. That was 3 years ago, right before COVID started. But it's a beautiful, beautiful place, and it's 7,200 feet up, and it's just beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I will plan on coming up there once. Let's see. Dr. Stromanis has a question.
Yes, John, I wanted to ask you just on a personal level, after such an exotic and interesting love life, are you alone now, or do you have somebody in your life who's your partner or lover?
I am alone.
You have 3
I,
dogs.
yeah, my dogs are my lovers now. Yeah, I haven't met, I've had 3 somewhat rocky relationships since if you read the previous chapter, I mean the chapter after the Yellow Springs chapter, when I moved to San Francisco with Ted. He was the love of my life, and then after he died, I had 3 successive relationships that weren't quite the same, and I probably was somewhat responsible for their demise, not the men, but the demise of the relationships,
Mhm.
and because none of them measured up to Ted.
Mhm.
Well, I wanted to say that your writing is wonderful. I have not read your book yet, but it does seem as if you're a terrific writer.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Well, so we're just about out of time. Unless there's any more questions, I really thank John for taking the time and revealing his story in such a pleasant way. It was a great book, and I'm sure that people enjoyed hearing it and hearing about you. I'd like to also thank the crew out here, Jesse and Wendy and Joan and Tanya for helping put this together. And like I say, we're working on getting them posted to the Antioch College. I think it's a YouTube site or something like that. Well, thank you so much.
And if any of you have, here's a shameless plug. Buddy has a Hollywood Connect. Let me know.
Could you say it again? Your audio just dropped out.
If anyone has a Hollywood connection to a potential, I've thought of the book as becoming either a Netflix series or a small film, or even a play, a stage play.
Mm-hmm. Well, people have asked me if I had connections based on the calls I have here, but no, I'm sorry. I'm really, I have no connections, but I will forward you the name of that publisher that does republish works. So, and good luck getting them in bookstores. I don't know,
And John, come to Reunion. I think it'll be inspiring and you might meet somebody special.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, you mean the Zoom reunion?
No, this year it's live and in person for a limited number.
In Yellow Springs?
Yes.
Yellow Springs, and the number has not been reached.
Mm-hmm.
Not yet.
You'll have to hold me up as I walk onto that campus.
Yes. Well, I met somebody, Hope Nathan, who saw the distress I was in and consoled me. I really have to. She's now a good friend on Facebook. Yeah, if you're there, we'll walk on campus together.
And you can go to the Glen and you can go to the Pine Forest and relive that part.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, bring your.
I don't know, Joe.
I don't know. Don't have a relapse there. Bring your.
No relapse, because I wound up having a period of my life where there was a drug period and drug addiction period that I write about in the book, and thanks to Mother Nature up here in the mountains, who I like to think of as my higher power, plus a little help from the.
No, dropped out on the internet. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, we lost that last bit of audio about Mother Nature being, a cleanse and an inspiration, but
Higher power.
It is a higher power.
And the reunion, just for your information, is July 14th to 17th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll write that down.
hope to see you there. I would love to meet you in person.
Sure. Is there still a bookstore? There's still more than one bookstore in Yellow Springs, right?
Lots of bookstores.
Yeah, maybe you can find a venue.
Yellow Springs has the highest density of bookstores per population of any place in the world, I think. There are lots of bookstores in Yellow Springs.
Mhm.
Joan, which one would you recommend that to carry my book?
Maybe Dark Star.
Okay. I'll look them up.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great book to have in Yellow Springs, I mean, it really speaks to so many people who are there, have been there, and just need some. I mean, your work is your book and your life is very inspiring, because it starts out, what I consider, dark, and then really, like you say, blossoms out into a great experience. So. All right. Okay. Thanks again for everybody. And we'll keep you posted.
Okay.
This was a great experience. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, Richard.
Bye.